Hello and welcome to the Delivering Innovation podcast from Perspectiv, in collaboration with the Centre for Creativity in Professional Practice at the Business School of City, University of London, formerly CAS. We look at what it takes to create value from innovation through conversations with people working in a range of roles and sectors, and we aim to share ideas that you can rely on to become more effective. I'm Ian Stromsmoe. In this episode, Andy Wilkins and I spoke with our very own Kate Stuart-Cox, who co-founded Perspectiv with Andy over 20 years ago. Kate has deep expertise in personal development, collaboration, leadership, and teamship, and we discussed delivering innovation primarily through Kate's experience working with an international marketing company to become extraordinarily effective in the face of constant competition. Working across diverse cultures, Kate has drawn the organisation into an amazing example of what can be achieved when people lead and collaborate well together. We talked about the excitement of the idea generation stage in innovation and how people tend to look down on the task of developing and implementing solutions.
One client described the next stage as dumping it on the sausage factory. I mean, how awful is that?
Kate also highlighted the importance of keeping consumers involved throughout the innovation process to maintain the newness. Stay there, we need you.
Yeah, some of them were quite scared, I think, to be asked to continue.
Now let's meet Kate. Hello, Andy.
Hi, Ian.
And welcome to today's guest, Kate Stuart-Cox. Thank you very much for joining us, Kate.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Kate, to start things off, we'd love you to give a brief introduction about your background and your role as it relates to delivering innovation.
Okay. I think my role really as a consultant with Perspectiv is helping companies look at how they manage change. My interest really over the years has been enabling, if you like, organizations and individuals to manage change, to increase their performance, to innovate, and particularly around the area of collaboration, which I think is vital these days for companies to really make big changes. People have to work in teams more, they have to work globally, internationally, and I have had a fantastic client, an opportunity to work with an international company to help them almost manage a complete culture change. So I love working with different markets, the Japanese, Americans, Chinese, Indians, all working together. How do you make that happen has been a particular lovely challenge for me. It's also a particular need to see how people actually apply it. The fact that a company is just a number of individuals. It's a number of people coming together to think and do something. And I think we forget that. We tend to kind of talk of an organization as if it's almost just a building. And until we have AI, I think the people are important. So that's almost been a little bit more of the weight of my focus. How do you enable people to have mindsets, to have processes, to have skills that allow them to collaborate and innovate together?
I love what you said then about an organisation is a bunch of individuals coming together, because, as you say, people don't think about organisations like that.
Yeah, I think I was once in a session myself where somebody asked us to draw our organisation. And it was interesting, everybody drew a building first, generally, a brand, like, the product. And very few of them, apart from me, had people in it. I drew lots of stick people. It was a very quick exercise, just draw your company. Very few of us actually drew people. Isn't that interesting? Just draw an outcome, and a lot of people had money signs and all sorts of things going on, but no people.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. Now I'll hand over to Andy for his notorious first question.
Okay. I'll get nervous.
Hi, Kate. Thanks
Hi,
for
Andy.
all of the responses so far. This doozy of a question is, so what does delivering innovation, turning ideas into value mean to you?
Okay. I think probably it's quite tough to help people turn around the notion, that innovation is all about ideas or just about ideas. It's amazing how many people still think if you get one wonderful, unique idea, that some kind of magic will happen and that's all you need. I often think of a quote, I think it was Ernest Gundling of 3M, who said, innovation is so much more than just a bright idea. It's an idea that gets implemented and has real impact. In other words, somebody has to make it happen. And for me, it's that making it happen part that's the tough side of it. I don't think it's surprising when you think about it. I tend to recall sessions where I facilitated perhaps what the client might be describing as an idea generation session. And let's say you had a number of people together in the room. And at the beginning, there's loads of excitement. There's a buzz, there's kind of glory about it. It's fun. People want to be there. They kind of put aside divisions. They generally tend to want to come together for something quite powerful. And then as the day used to go on and we would start to turn around to, okay, now what? What's going to happen next? Who's going to do something about this? The climate would drop, it would slump and there'd be this droop as people started to individually think, oh, this is going to mean work for me. This is going to add overtime. This is going to be a weight, and it would drop. And part of I think the skill of great leaders was to keep motivating people on the implementation, that the execution was in itself something incredibly valuable. Perhaps rather than at one point hearing one client describe the next stage as dumping it on the sausage factory. I mean, how awful is that? But that's often what happens. It's the feeling that someone else is now going to do it, and the doing part is less than the idea creation. So delivering innovation means, how do you enable people to get excited, to sustain levels of energy around the execution, and to see it as valuable? Maybe I think the second part of answering your question would be actually what happens before the ideas. To me, not enough attention is often paid to that front end of the process. The diagnostic piece, the piece where you have to find out, really what is the challenge? Why are you doing this? Why are you having the ideas in the first place? How do they align with the objectives? How do they align with the goals and the strategy? Often I found people don't spend enough time looking at what is the real problem here and why do you want to address it, and really pushing the time for that. People want to leap into the idea generation. It's the fun part to me. Doesn't mean it's not easy. I think coming up with ideas is not easy. But yeah, that's what I would say. Delivering innovation is getting this balance. Perhaps even understanding what type of innovation. Are you looking for incremental, build on something? Are you looking for something so radical that you've got to really got to engage a lot of people and include a lot of people in that process?
What came to mind as you were talking about where people like to spend their time and energy, you probably know there's a model that we use called the critical path to innovation, where it talks about, if you like, at a map level, need, idea, solution, diffusion, and valorization. We did a little study recently in class. I asked the class to estimate, if they had 100 points, where do they think the world allocates their time, if you think
right.
about a whole organization. And the average came out as 10% on need, 25% on ideas, 35% on solutions, 20% on disseminating and diffusing, and 10% on valorizing. The idea and solution space there is 60%. So the thing that came to mind to me is a bit like going to the doctor, right? And you sort of book a doctor's appointment. When you get to the receptionist says, try this.
Yeah.
I came to see the doctors. No, we'll skip the diagnostic bit, figuring out what the need is. We'll just try that. Here's an idea. Let us know how you get on. There's so many things you talked about I want to go back to. Collaboration, climate, facilitation, all these things. I'm going to actually start at the last one because I think it's a really toxic sometimes and pernicious issue at the end. There's somewhere this concept has grown up that coming up with the thought is somehow superior or better or different. And then I don't have to concern myself with the doing and making it happen. I was curious about, why do you think that is? Why is there this, let's just come up with the thoughts and then, as you call it, dump it on the sausage factory?
Chuck it to the sausage factory.
Chuck it to the sausage factory, yeah, which is patronizing at least.
Well, I think maybe it's an interesting thing that in some ways I do like from a personal point of view, going back to my days when I used to work in new product development myself. So I was responsible, if you like, for ensuring that the newness was there. And I could have very happy days working with my teams in that idea generation phase. That newness was exciting. And I think one of the things that I learned about that, though, the excitement of the idea generation phase came after we would spend, going back to your percentages, Andy, probably I would say 40%. And in those days, I worked for a company where it would be the research or the investigation, the diagnosis would be with consumers. What are they really looking for? So I spent a lot of my time in that newness idea phase. However, the big learning was that this company was split. And what they did was they had another part of the company that would be the doers in this case. And it was awful. It was like a Cold War. We were on different floors and literally they were down and we were upstairs. It was like, come up to the creative new ideas people and go down to the people that have to actually bring it to life. So I used to try and break that barrier very early, off my own bat. And I would ask people from the down department to come up and be included. That worked so well. And I said, we have to get consumers in here and we have to ask them to join us and we have to keep them there, keep them through the whole process so that they could keep us fresh. The desire for newness. Eventually, the challenge would be, how do you keep that when there were so many other factors that would almost slow it down or take away the original freshness of the idea? And the consumers would be really good at doing that. Now in my work, I'm always trying to encourage inclusion. I think is a hugely important thing. It doesn't mean total integration necessarily of the people that are going to be responsible for carrying it through and the people that originated the idea, but how can you include them as much as possible? Because you have ownership and ownership is motivation. But the other thing I kind of get carried away sometimes with is including people who think they're not creative in that original process. Everybody has the ability to come up with something. And I can think of many occasions where I've helped clients bring, maybe they're generating something, they want to come up with new ideas, perhaps even for a product, and they've brought me in to help facilitate sessions and the process. And I say, well, we need some fresh blood in here. It's normally perhaps the marketing department or the R&D department. And I say, well, what about finance? How about bringing in someone from the finance? And they look at me like I'm absolutely crazy. And I say, could you give me a reason why not? Why wouldn't you bring in some new thinking? And the insinuation is, well, what can they possibly bring? So we did an experiment once and we brought two people in from the finance department. They were so excited to be asked to have some validation that they could actually think, beyond a spreadsheet. And they came in, they were very nervous. And, my role was to create the climate for them to feel confident. And we had a 2-day session. And one of the ideas that emerged was from one of the finance guys. Now, obviously, it needed a lot of work from people with far more experience relative to this organization's product. But he felt part of that. And I said, what you need to do is keep this person involved. Why wouldn't you help them through the process? And actually, he did add, because he has no baggage. When you're not involved directly in something, you bring new thinking that's alive and something maybe no one's thought of before. So it was fantastic to see that process happen. And I think I kind of encourage that a lot. One of the things with working with international companies is if you need two cultures to collaborate, Japan and the USA, for example, you've got to respect that they are going to bring different types of thinking. It's valuing differences that's the important part for me.
When you said that you had consumers and you had to keep them there, I had this picture of cages with consumers in. Stay there. We need you.
Yeah. Yes. Well, actually, yes, some of them were quite scared, I think, to be asked to continue, but they were really into it and they were so helpful. They added real value. It's fantastic.
So, Kate, thanks for all of that. I love the idea that everyone is creative, and that's something we've covered before, pushing against the paradigm, right? That there's certain types that are creative, right? The creatives, and finance aren't one of them, right? My understanding is just by being human, we're all creative. So it's clearly nonsense. When you talked about climate earlier on, you were talking about a meeting, and then you've talked about culture. Can you tell us a little bit what's on your mind about how you hold those separate, if you remember?
Yes, I probably maybe need to make distinctions on some of the words here. I think when I referred to at the beginning, helping a company make a complete culture change, I think it's a long term, and it did take a long time. This wasn't something that you could do that happened instantly. It was maybe a process of building sufficient skills within the organizations that, if you like, promoted a particular mindset, and then enabling that everyone that joined the company was aware that that was really important. And it was consistently maintaining the skill and the development of, particularly around these interpersonal relationships that I was trying to build, so that there became some norms within the company of how you behave. This is how we do it around here. And it was to do with changing the company to one of collaboration. So the success of the organization was dependent on people collaborating. And from the CEO's point of view, nothing was going to change, nothing was going to really develop for a long-term future and to be innovative if the people weren't really working together. So there were several markets. Chinese, obviously China being a hugely important, India, Japan, the US, and a kind of central hub in Hong Kong. So it's been a very big challenge, I would say, absolutely led by the dedication of the CEO and his belief, his willing to really put this into practice and make it happen rather than lip service. I think a lot of people have experienced that, we believe in the people, but actually it's just meaningless. Whereas if you went to this company, you would see this culture of beliefs, values, and living it, the behaviors. They would be still Japanese and Chinese and Indian and American and have their own national culture. I'm not talking so much about that. I'm talking about the culture of the company. Whereas the climate maybe is more, how can we initiate and help the climate here in the present, or certainly does not need that length of time that I had the opportunity to use. And I think the leadership, the belief of the CEO, the principles that he would actually role model, his ability to weave this through the organization, to accept that, yes, he had a role to play, as do the leaders in the company. But it's not only that, it's through everyone. So everybody, all staff members, are trained in the same way. They're all given the same opportunity. And my role is really almost like not the garage, but servicing the car. It's like, it's not a one-off thing. It's constant, it's continual learning and growth. And this inclusivity that he has, it's listening, the skills that they have, listening to people that are on the junior level. It's listening to people from different departments. It's breaking down silos and tribes, all that good stuff. It really is vital for the survival of that organization that they continue to innovate and drive change, but also that they collaborate, that the way they do things is through collaboration and sharing. The amount of information, data, knowledge that is never shared in companies is incredible. And I think the CEO first recognized that unless these 4 markets were going to break down that territorial, this is just my information, not particularly in a deliberate way, it's just it wasn't happening. And it had to be more proactively put in place, this opportunity for people to share. And that's tough because, to a degree, some kind of knowledge is power. And, they broke this down. It's like a constant sharing of successes as well, and also of failures, what happened, reviewing this process and going back and saying, what did we learn? This learning is a sort of in their blood now. A culture of sort of self-reflection, a reflection on projects, teamship skills. It all helps to build that collaboration, but you've got to have that glue of clear goals that they all share. You could go to a junior member and say, what is the company about? And they would know. They have a very clear roadmap that's described, and everybody knows kind of why they're doing things. Why am I here? That great driver of having some kind of key purpose.
I love the idea that what you've effectively managed to build is, or the company has, is one operating system. That's the way I'm just going to summarize this. You talked about it as behavior norms and aspects to do with collaboration and learning and innovation. So I'm just going to summarize that as a shared operating system. Now, that's not something that is kind of easy to implement into an organization. And you talked about it's continual. You have to, like car maintenance, you have to keep doing it. Roughly, how long did this take to embed this common operating system?
I would say that to get it to the point where they are now, where they're incredibly good at this, overall the success has been evident. I would say it's like a 10-year journey, particularly in the last 5 years, where the CEO, who was working in another role at the company, became CEO and has pushed it even further than it was. So I think it needs a driver from the top to help that happen. But it's been fantastic to see their development. Maybe a few years ago, they had a summit, where for the first time ever, where all the markets came together. What was interesting was that there was this tangible appreciation. I can remember, sitting, watching a table, we did some workshops, and, there's 3 Japanese at the table, 4 Chinese, 2 Americans, and how they spoke a language. And I don't mean their own national language. I mean the language of the company, particularly to do with the things that I've been helping them with. So they had things like the view as a psychometric that we know helps identify differences and helps you manage differences. And they'd all done values, and they'd all looked at other skills like listening skills, active listening skills, feedback skills to manage conflict. And whoever you spoke to could have this connection automatically. They'd never met, remember, they'd never physically met, but they instantly could have this language of that culture. We were there to look at, what was the future vision, and we were involving them literally in the new vision of the company, or how to materialize certain things. And there was a fantastic atmosphere, but doesn't mean it's easy. I think, in the teamship skills that I build, or teamwork with this company, It's not easy. It demands a lot of effort from people, a lot of practice, a lot of encouragement from the leaders to give energy to this. So if you're practicing a skill, and for collaboration particularly, the skills of developing a relationship where you can be open and you can talk about something in a way that does not provoke defensiveness in the other person is hugely vital. I mean, collaboration in innovation terms, where you have to let go of your ego. You have to let go of something. To me, collaboration is not just coming together vaguely. You can have cooperation without full collaboration. And collaboration means that, can you, for example, come together with another person and look at the solution, not in the sense of promoting or influencing or nicely encouraging the other person to go with your idea, and the other person is nicely encouraging you to go with theirs. That, yes, maybe compromise can be an outcome, but what you want is for those people to almost drop those two ideas and work together to generate something, a third and better way. It's not just either or, it's and. If we work together really well here, and we're open and we let go of our ego, we can come up with something amazingly powerful that neither of us thought of. That to me is when I've seen collaboration in this company work effectively, that's what happens. And you have to have some skills to do that. You have to have the ability to value someone else, to really value the differences, to have enough self-awareness of how you come across, how you need to maybe flex your behavior, change the way you think in order to help and encourage the other person. And if two people are doing that, the magic happens. So that's what I love seeing, people working together in that way. Not easy, not easy at all.
Coming up, Kate talks about the elephant in the room and not letting it get in the way or grow too big.
Elephants occur, they're there. And what you try not to do is keep them as the baby elephant, not let them grow so huge they impact the whole team.
And Andy highlights the return on investment of Kate's client work.
What they found from it is they are one of the most effective in terms of returns on investment marketing companies on planet Earth from any sector.
Now let's get back to it.
I've come away thinking that what you've managed to do over the last 20 years or so working with this organisation is embed and sustain change in everyone.
Yeah, that would be a great way of saying it.
So it's not something, they're all involved in it, and they have a shared operating system, the shared language that you talked about.
Yeah.
So what are the other things that are shared?
If you like, I suppose what I'm doing is putting one of your systems in place, or helping the CEO put in place a system that develops their people. So it would include things like a leadership program. It includes, I work with the teams themselves. So team development, not in the sense of team building, that dreadful thing where everybody plays games and nothing else happens. It's about developing real skills. So the model that I use is one based on 7 factors of high team performance. So two quite more hard areas, which is obviously around goal setting, having clear objectives, direction, intention that's clear. Not only setting them, but it's ensuring people are clear. And that's where the climate comes in, the ability for someone to say, I put their hand up and say, I don't know what you mean. I don't know what this strategy is about. It's not clear enough for me. So it's about setting clear goals and objectives. The other hard one is literally enabling people to apply things with effective processes. And that would depend on, what the company needs. So, for example, this company would use OKRs to set objectives. They would use RASCI as a means of managing responsibilities in projects, those kind of things, or they have finance systems and so on. So it's like you need effective processes to help you. And then there are 4 soft, if you like, the soft skills. The first one is support. A natural thing, one might say, to support each other, but it's more about letting go of your ego, supporting someone else when it's not your job. Like rolling your sleeves up, doing something that you don't have to do in order to support a teammate. There's respect and recognition, which is around respect for people, for differences, for their time, their workloads, their experience, their expertise. Respect also for ideas, which is where, deferring judgment, not making assumptions too early, giving someone's idea a chance, which of course we don't tend to do. We tend to, potentially we know we can diss ideas quite easily if we're not careful. Then there's skillful communication, which is around this ability to listen, would be the first one. Hugely underrated skill. Listen well, but actively listen, combined with giving and receiving feedback well. How do you do that? I think a lot of companies do that, but they don't do them they maybe have one-off training. Whereas I would say in my work, I do this consistent practice on those 2 skills. Combined together, they give you the ability to dialogue. In other words, to look at a situation from different angles, from different perspectives, to let go of assumptions and have a conversation with no kind of sides, no battles, to have a conversation where you can look at the problem in a new way, step into someone else's shoes, all those good things, skillful communication. And then the biggest, well, it's not the biggest one, it's the toughest one, is mutual accountability. So shared responsibility, it's taking responsibility for your own development, an expectation within the company that you're going to apply yourself, that you're not just going to come to this Kate's workshop and go, oh, yeah, that was interesting. It's actually, what are you doing with these things? What responsibility are you taking for your own development? But it's a little bit more than that. It's eventually the hardest challenge of all, which is, how do you call someone out? Can you have a culture where you can call someone out on, reneging on a commitment or a poor behavior? That's really tough. But what it does when it works is it embodies absolute teamship to me. That team is able to be so powerfully productive and effective together that they have these skills that you can enable to say, someone else call you out. Think how many times that actually happens in companies. It's incredibly powerful when it does. And it's still the hardest one they all work with, particularly where in a culture, Eastern culture, for China or Japan, where calling each other out is almost anti what would be their natural collective instinct to protect and not call each other, not to lose face or make any accusations. So it's a difficult one, and you have to respect that culture when I'm working with them. Sometimes it takes longer, and they would not have perhaps the same conversations, but they get to the point where they can be open and understand in a more productive way. So if I give you an example, just because they're kind of high performing doesn't mean that you can't have human conflict. So let's say there are 2 people or 2 or 3 people are having what potentially could become a conflict. Something has happened where each individual is affected by the other's behavior or lack of the behavior they are aspiring to. So the dialogic aspect of it is can they come together? What the culture would be that they first of all acknowledge it. They have in their mindset, we need to address this, rather than leaving it, burying it, or in the terminology we sometimes use, it's like, the elephants in the room. Elephants occur. They're there. And what you're trying to do is keep them as the baby elephant, not let them grow so huge they impact the whole team. So what do you want to do about this? They would come together, and using their communication skills, they would say, one of them would be able to say, look, we agreed that this is the type of behavior. What I felt was, and they would raise it and say, I don't think that's fair, or this was happening, calling each other out, not letting it go. But the way in which they would deal with it would be so skillful that they could communicate, work through that conversation to a productive outcome without feeling slapped, hurt. It would be difficult and it would be uncomfortable, but they would resolve it. The opposite culture would say, here's the conflict. Either let's not talk about it, but let's those three individuals fester. The hurt or the anger or the emotion festers, it builds. More and more assumptions are made about the other person's motivations when they're not true, they're not accurate, and you get real conflict. And those people are unproductive in terms of team performance because they're no longer able to work together effectively. There's a resistance, there's lack of engagement, there's lack of communication. So resolving these things first it's about performance, not just about being nice. I mean, although that's generally it's a better place sometimes to be than in total conflict, but it's about performing well. You have to get people to be able to come together and work collaboratively. And if these elephants are in the way, nothing happens, or actually it's damaging.
Talk about the elephant.
Yes.
I love this, the idea of the size of the elephant. You don't want the elephant to get too big. Kate, you talked about this model, and I thought you said there are 7 factors, and I may have missed one, but so you had clear objectives, effective processes, the 2 hard ones. Then you had 4 behavioral aspects, the softer aspects: support, respect, effective comms, and mutual accountability.
Sorry, I missed the big one.
My maths adds up to 6.
Absolutely right, Andy. I missed the fundamental one.
Because, what's the other one?
It's almost, to me, it kind of goes without saying. So in the middle, if you were to draw this as a sort of diagram, you'd have right in the middle would be trust. It's the foundation to me. You really can't have a level of mutual accountability if you've got no trust. But they connected. So, my diagram would have trust in the middle, the other 6 around the outside, but interconnected, going diagonally and in a circular fashion, because, you could say, well, if you started with communication and started with those skills, they help trust, and vice versa. So to me, they're very connected. But yes, sorry, Andy, trust is the 7th, but actually the very important one that sits in the middle. One of my things about trust is setting expectations. Trust is a set of expectations met. Now, I didn't come up with that, but I can remember reading it years ago and thinking that's so true. If I don't know what you expect of me, how can I deliver on it? And yet, if you don't tell me and I don't fulfill it, how fair is that on me? So what we encourage is this communication of, particularly in behaviours, everybody generally gets the task expectations clearly set for them. You need to deliver that by simple, easy, have you done it or not? It's how you deliver it. So in teamship skills, as we call them, it's like, are you clear about, maybe there's setting up a new project team? Instead of just focusing on the task, what I encourage is, what are the behaviours, the particular behaviours maybe within this little project team in this organisation that are required? And you go back and you confirm, this is how we're going to work together. So you set expectations of each other from a behavioural perspective. And then you're trying to do with trust, do what you say you're going to do is just a fundamental thing. People expect delivery on the promises. Are you credible enough that I can rely on you that you're going to do something that I ask of you? So I think the trust aspects, that would be 2 fundamentals, starting points.
So the picture that's emerging for me is one of this shared operating system built around this 7-point model. What you're describing is teamship at an individual level, that it's a set of individual capabilities. And then you're talking about, there's a word we use sometimes, benign structures. So that's this operating system operates at my level, at the team level. And then you talked about teams of teams effectively across the organization, all working. They're all using this same 7-point model. And you also talked as well, that seems to be underpinning this. There's an old concept, it sometimes comes back into fashion for a while in management speak and then goes away again, called the concept of a learning organization. And what I'm hearing you talk about is it's not a learning organization, but actually they're learning people. The way you get a learning organization is to focus on everybody learning and embedding a sustaining change continually in themselves. So I was trying to paraphrase my understanding of the situation, but the question that links to this is, how on earth did you put that in? Okay, you've got these 4 markets I'm thinking about: China, Japan, India, and the USA, with head office in Hong Kong. And somehow you've embedded this in each of those countries. And I think you said at the start, this wasn't a one-off. You didn't do a training course on how to do this in 2004, and that was it. And you said, good luck, and left. My understanding is these 7 factors, you go back and talk about it fairly constantly. Could you give us an image about what it's taken to get this into play? What do you do with each of these places each year?
Oh, okay. Well, I think, the first stage is trust of the CEO in what I'm trying to do with him, working very closely with him and his global leadership team. So the heads of each of those markets, again, very inclusive. Yes, he may make individual decisions himself, but from a strategic point of view, and therefore verification of the kind of behavioral things that happen in each market, he brings those people together 3 or 4 times a year. Now that takes a lot of their time. But, and I facilitate those sessions, and we have, if you like, starting point is, how are they leading? How are they working as a team? So it starts with them. And they've realized that through their behaviors as a global leadership team, they need to be role modeling, and it's beneficial. They work through strategy faster. They agree on what's happening in the company. It's really productive. From the CEO's point of view, this is what is happening. We are investing in this training and development of all of our people, and he that would then allocate responsibility to those leaders to work with me to set up and schedule the training. So the training would involve, depending on the market and the needs, it would involve 2 or 3 team sessions with the whole team, which would then be carried through by action setting and development that I would then help the leader of that market monitor with the individual. So how are they doing on what they've said they were going to do as individuals, and generally as we will do this and I will do certain things. Each individual has a set of actions coming out of those team sessions. So it's kept up throughout the year. I also do a leadership training with those individuals to help them role model behaviors. And at the same time, we would also do, going back to, if you like, the innovation of their products, what they're trying to develop. I also have set up a CPS, creative problem solving, at a basic level, but a training sessions whereby each individual in the company, no matter what your role, goes through a program to understand the principles and some of the tools that they can use to solve problems themselves. So we're back to that, is the guy in finance creative? Yes, they are. And if they have a challenge, they can use these skills, have the right mindset to think, I can actually solve this myself. It also makes them, in the creative problem solving terms, better resource group members for when they're actually coming together to work on something. But this is every individual saying, you have the capability to solve your problems. Before you say, I can't do this, I don't know what to do, use the skills, use the tools. And they found that this has been incredibly helpful. So it's a blend of teamship. Does each individual have a number of skills to help them be a better team member and to be a better manager of their relationships, the interpersonal relationships? And do they have the wherewithal, at least have a basic understanding of looking at a problem differently, even to the very basics that in the company you will hear people talking in a language of how to. The principle is that when you have a negative, you can come up with and you say something isn't working or it's not right. It's a no. It's always saying no, no, no. And instead of just using those negative statements all the time, you turn them around. You turn it into how might I, or how to. And you use this as a springboard for a solution. So you have a question to ask. You don't cut something dead. And even having that very basic language in a company where, somebody says, oh, well, okay, well, what's the how to here? What's our problem we could work together on? Is fantastic.
I've got a question. That development you talked about, you go round each of the 4 markets every year, right? The way you described it, and you keep coming back at these areas and strengthening and developing and giving people the time to stop and think and take actions and check in on how they've gone. That's something that you've said that's taken about 20 years, start of the 2000s, I think.
2003, 4, yeah.
It's a good 15, nearly 20 years. The thing is, I guess the shareholders, somebody someday thought, well, hang on a sec, what's the value of this? And I'm going to share with you or remind you of some information that I think you shared a while back, that their strategy director did some research around the return on investment with the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising, which is the gold standard for assessing the effectiveness in this field. What they found from it is they are one of the most effective in terms of returns on investment marketing companies on planet Earth from any sector. That research was done with them, I think, 2017, 2018. But ultimately, that's the bottom line. You've helped turn them into being one of the most effective marketing companies. And this is what it takes.
I didn't work with the strategy director on how he came about with that research, but I think what he was saying is that effectively as a global organization too, that the way they interacted with each other was part of their success. The need of that global interaction was vital. And therefore, if part of my role was helping people come together and be able to collaborate, yes, it's been hugely important. Just looking at last year, the challenges of the pandemic, the CEO, I think, would say that they were very successful. All the leaders have said, without the strength of the collaboration and the teamship within the teams helping each other through this dreadful year, if they didn't have those skills, they wouldn't have been able to perform. Just the basics of managing lockdowns and the working from home and still being so productive across markets and within teams. I think they all would stand up and say that was really helpful.
A vital investment, a worthwhile investment.
Yeah.
So it's like the emotional kind of social support for the program, as well as the external verification from an economics point of view with the IPA research that was done as well.
An example would be a new product that was developed with Japan and the USA. They would all say, this would have taken us so much longer. It wouldn't have happened. It might not have happened at all. It might not have happened so well without their ability to connect and work productively because they have these good relationships. It just wouldn't have happened. Because, Japan and the USA, from a cultural point of view, couldn't be more opposite. Literally, if you look at cultural factors. So to overcome some of those things, they had this better communication, valuing their differences, all those good things.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. I'm so happy to have had this conversation with you, and thank you so much for all the thoughts that you've shared here. I'm going to head towards a final question, which is, if you were to reflect over your whole career, but particularly that with your consulting and advising and developing people, and thought about all the projects that you've been involved in that were a success, change happened, needs met, clients were happy, and then you had another pile of projects where they all were a bit fizzled out, didn't really cut the mustard, and the customers weren't very happy. What would you think would separate or account for the difference between the first list and the second list? What would be the top 3 things with the benefit of all that wisdom and hindsight?
Well, that's quite a tricky one, Andy. I think from the point of view of the successes, I think as a consultant working with a client and enabling that client to meet their needs, it's so important that you have the CEO or the client that's willing to learn, willing to accept there are some things that they don't know, that they could be better at, that they need to be open to. Having a client or working with a CEO or a director or someone who's from a positional point of view, the leader, having someone who feels that they really want to be committed to learning. I think that clientship is so helpful. If I look at the things that haven't worked so well, I've been working with clients that are rigid, to a level one might say arrogant. They're just resistant to making the change. They kind of want the outcome without actually having to do anything or change themselves. So many things are very tough for leaders, but I think that makes a difference. Over the years, realizing that how do you help people manage paradoxes, that push-pull tension, that there is no black or white. There is no easy answer. There's no quick fix. There's no one position that is going to be a miracle cure. And if you just get there, you'll be fine. It's walking constantly backwards and forth along a continuum that's a real tension. You know, do you take risks? Do you stay safe? Do you work from a local point of view? Do you work from a global mindset? Do you delegate? Do you keep control? You know, they're just continuums. So I think this ability to help someone manage the paradoxes and keep finding balances in a situation has been really helpful for me. This feeling of it's not either an or, and I feel it helps to keep reminding people, whether it's they're flexing their mindset, whether they're flexing their behavior, whether they're able to see something from a different perspective and acknowledge it and be open to it. It's this ability to feel that they can actually shift, make a change in their own thinking, and from then having a really good appraisal of the needs of the client. Checking in, am I going along the right way? Am I helping them? What is the real problem they want help with? What do they really need from me? And what do they really need as the outcome? I think that's incredibly helpful to get the good starting point from the beginning.
So, client open to learn. This idea about walking the tightrope of paradoxes, the second one, and acceptance in their head that that's what it's like. And this third one is about appraising needs and starting from that point and moving from there, but constantly checking in, I think is what I heard as the three aspects. I'm so happy to have had this conversation with you, and thank you so much for all the thoughts that you've shared here.
Kate, we're going to end with our 3 standard questions that are designed to reveal a little bit more about you personally.
Okay.
If you could, please give an answer and then briefly explain the reasoning for your answer. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
First question, follow the rules or break the rules?
I kind of sit in the middle, or maybe I do a bit of both. Perhaps something that I find I do myself is always trying to find a balance. It seems to be a natural preference for me. So sometimes, you know, if I feel I'm following the rules too far, then I'll switch. And I have this urge to break something or do something differently. So I actually find this either or thing quite disturbing sometimes. And I'm always encouraging clients to maybe not just always have to simplify things down to a black or white. You know, maybe they do need to look at 2 sides of things. And that's my tendency. If I think that breaking the rules is really going to impact someone badly, then I'll follow it. If I see something that client or working with a team and everything's so rigid, then I will, you know, it kind of almost drives me nuts and I will push. Mm-hmm. So probably a bit of both is my answer.
I like that. We've had quite a few people sit on the fence, but I like your answer, which is actually both.
Yeah, maybe both.
Okay, so next question.
Okay.
Talk it through with others or think it through on your own?
So you're going to hate me again then, because I think this is something that's quite important for me to flex all the time, because I find that, when I used to work with teams myself, or was leading teams, particularly in new product development, the stimulus was always talking it through with others, engaging them. I loved that. But I do find I can work quite happily on my own, and doing the job that I'm doing now as a consultant, and I'm more having to think things through before I maybe have that engagement with the other person is really rewarding. I find I need that time. And sometimes I end up thinking things through too deeply before sharing them, which is always a problem. But I see the value in both again. And it's perhaps a benefit if you're in a role where you're facilitating to be able to switch, to be able to, or encourage other people to maybe slow down in working with teams, or in sessions where I'm having a group together. I'm always conscious that if people are talking too much, what about the people who need to think, and vice versa? So for me, it's, again, I'm probably right in the middle.
Balancing both.
Yeah.
Okay, well, last question. I might be able to guess the answer to this one. Trust your head or follow your heart?
I think if you mean when making decisions, or what's my first reaction, I think it's probably slightly more towards follow my heart. There's an emotional response, a gut response. I think I have some instincts that generally guide me well. I'm not saying that I'm always right, but I do think my gut instincts are fairly good. So I'll go there first, but then I think I come back and I check it out. Maybe I do have times where, again, if someone is just making an impulsive decision, or I'm helping a client, or I'm coaching someone, and they're just jumping to these conclusions without even rationalizing it or thinking it through, or applying sort of any kind of logic, then I'll probably question them to help them do that. So I do that myself, but I think, I'm probably more of a reacting to an emotion first, looking at the people side of it. What's the effect? How am I feeling? I use that word, feeling. Yeah. I notice in emails I put, how do you feel about this, rather than how do you think about it? That kind of thing.
Yeah. But feelings before then trying to think it through and sort of rationalize it.
Yeah, I think it's a slight preference there. Yeah. Maybe not quite so in the middle.
Yes. Yeah. One before the other. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for those answers.
Fabulous. Kate, thank you for sharing all of your thoughts and experiences with us. So I'm going to sign off there, and thank you.
I just want to say thank you very much as well. It's been really inspiring. I wrote down so many Post-it notes, all of this gold dust. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Brilliant.
Can we do a test? So there's my pile. I don't know. I might count them out.
I've got 5. I've got 5.
5? Is that it?
Yeah. Well, they're all actions for me, from what Kate said.
All right. Thank you for inviting me. It's been great fun.
This podcast was brought to you by Perspectiv, in collaboration with the Centre for Creativity in Professional Practice at the Business School of City, University of London. You can follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, or visit us at perspectiv.co.uk, Perspectiv without an E. Please like and subscribe. Thank you for listening, and please join us again.